No fur, but plenty of hair. You sit with your back to a friend or sibling or partner while they gently comb through your scalp with fingers or a simple comb made from bone or wood. They pick at little bumps, remove bits of debris, crush an unlucky louse between their nails. It is both practical and soothing, the kind of intimate contact that says without words, "You matter, I am paying attention to you." Then comes decoration. Red ochre, a naturally occurring iron-rich pigment, shows up at human sites going back hundreds of thousands of years. It is often ground into powder, mixed with fat or water, and applied to skin or hair. Is it sunscreen, insect repellent, symbolic body paint? It might be all three at once. You sit while someone traces lines on your face, your chest, your arms. Maybe they mark you as a member of a particular band. Maybe they signal your role in a ritual or your status as someone who's completed a dangerous hunt. Hair is braided. Beards are trimmed or decorated. Simple jewelry made from shells, teeth, or carved bone is threaded through hair or hung from cords around wrists and necks. These acts take time. They are not required to eat, drink, or stay alive, but they are part of how early humans turned bare survival into a life with identity, beauty, and meaning. And in between all this talking and playing and decorating and music making, there are long stretches of something that in the modern world we have almost forgotten how to do, just watching. You lie on your back and look at the clouds drifting across the sky. You sit quietly and follow the path of a line of ants carrying food back to their nest. You stand at the edge of camp and watch a herd of animals grazing in the distance, the way they cluster and scatter, how the wind shifts their scent. You trace the patterns of stars, noticing how some constellations rise at particular times of year, how the moon waxes and wanes. To a modern observer, this might look like boredom, but for early humans, this constant, gentle observing is part of how they build a mental map of the world. It trains attention. It sharpens intuition. The person who has spent hundreds of evenings quietly watching the sky might be the first to notice an unusual pattern of clouds that hints at an approaching storm. The child who has spent endless hours following animal tracks just for fun might become the best tracker in the band without ever being formally taught. And there is something else here, something less practical and more mysterious. When you have no glowing screens, no written words, no background music piped in from distant speakers, silence and stillness do not feel empty. They feel full of insect hum and bird calls, the sigh of wind through grass, the distant rush of water, the soft breathing of people you love nearby. In that stillness, the boundary between you and the world can feel thinner. You are not a separate mind trapped in a frantic schedule, glancing at nature through a window on your day off. You are an animal in an environment, embedded in it, attentive to it, shaped by it. So the day of an early human 40,000 years ago is not a blur of endless toil. It is a pattern of effort and ease, of focused work and rambling leisure, hunting, gathering, crafting, yes, but also joking, singing, dancing, grooming, decorating, storytelling, cloud watching, stargazing. Their lives were dangerous in ways ours usually are not. Illness, injury, and hunger were always nearby. But they also had something that has become rare in many modern lives. Long, unbroken stretches of time in which nothing urgent had to be done. Time to let the mind wander. Time to be with others without an agenda. Time to simply be awake in a living world. And as the fire dies down and the last story fades into the warmth of night, that spaciousness follows you into sleep. Tomorrow there will be work again, but there will also be music and laughter in the slow, quiet business of being human. So let us zoom back in on that ordinary day, 40,000 years ago. You are not alone out there on the savannah or in the forest or along the icy riverbank. You live in a band, not a village, not a city, a tiny human world of maybe 20, 30, 40 people, rarely more than 50. Small enough that you know every voice, every laugh, every step in the dark. You can tell who is walking behind you by the way their foot scrapes the ground. You recognize a cough in the middle of the night. This is not an accident. It is how your species works. Bands that are too small cannot defend themselves, cannot share enough skills, cannot find enough marriage partners. Bands that are too big become unstable. Too many conflicts, too many mouths to feed, too hard to move together when the herds leave or the seasons change. So natural selection, culture, and sheer practicality have all pushed your ancestors into a kind of sweet spot. A living room-sized society, intimate, flexible, deeply personal. Everyone in that little group fits into a mental map in your head. Who is generous? Who is lazy? Who can be trusted to keep a secret? Who will share food when the hunt goes badly? Who will quietly slip your child a piece of dried meat when you are not looking? These invisible maps of relationships are as important as stone tools or fire. They are how your people survive. And where there are relationships, there is conflict, not courtroom drama, not kings and judges, but everyday friction. Someone took more meat than they earned. Someone flirted with someone else's partner. Someone skipped their turn watching fire. In a band this small, you cannot just walk away and never see them again. You are going to be sleeping 10 feet from them tonight. So, how do you keep the peace without police laws or prisons? You use the oldest tools human beings ever invented. Gossip, mediation, reputation. Gossip in your world is not idle chatter. It is law enforcement, news, and social media rolled into one. When two hunters argue over who wounded the antelope first, people notice. The story gets repeated around the fire that night, retold and reshaped. By the time it has made the rounds, everyone knows who was selfish, who was generous, who apologized, who held a grudge. No one writes anything down, but nothing is forgotten. If someone hoards food, that becomes a story. Remember when he hid that marrow bone? The next time there's a shortage, people may be slower to share with him. If someone is brave in a dangerous hunt or kind to a sick elder, that becomes a story, too. These stories are your social credit score. They determine who gets help when they are in trouble, who is trusted with important tasks, who is allowed to sit in on serious conversations. For bigger conflicts, you do not have a courthouse. You have elders. The older woman who has seen 100 arguments about meat and marriage. The man who remembers the last time two brothers almost came to blows and how that was settled. They are not judges in the modern sense, but people turn to them when tempers flare. They sit between the angry parties, speak slowly, bring up past events. They add context, remind everyone of shared hardships and past kindnesses. Mediation is a survival strategy. A feud in a band of 30 can be a death sentence. Split the group in half, and suddenly each side is too small to defend itself, too weak to move far, too vulnerable to the next bad winter. So the whole social system is quietly biased toward reconciliation. People tease instead of accusing directly. They complain in roundabout ways. They sing songs that hint at bad behavior rather than naming names. It might sound indirect, but that soft pressure is powerful. It lets people change without losing face. It lets them step back from the edge. Underneath all of this, there is a simple truth. Your survival depends on other people. That starts early, from the moment you are born, in your band. Children do not belong to just one nuclear family in the modern sense. They belong to the camp, to the group, to the network. Your mother matters. Your father matters. But so do your grandparents, your aunts and uncles, your older siblings, and even unrelated adults who have basically been adopted into the family circle. In the language of modern anthropology, this is cooperative breeding. In the language of your ancestors, it is just life. Your mother might be off gathering roots, carrying your younger sibling, or helping process meat. Someone else keeps you entertained. An aunt lets you gnaw on a bit of hide. An older cousin shows you how to stack little stones. A grandmother hums a rhythmic pattern while she braids cord, and your brain quietly absorbs the sounds of your language. It takes a village is not a metaphor here. It is a job description. If your mother dies or gets injured or simply has to walk all day to track a migrating herd, you do not automatically die with her. There are other breasts to nourish from, other arms to carry you, other minds invested in your survival. That redundancy, multiple adults caring for the same children, is an invisible safety net woven through early human life. It also frees people to specialize. Some adults are better at patient teaching, some at rough play that teaches balance and strength, some at comforting you when you wake from a nightmare. The result is that by the time you are 10 or 12, you have learned from a whole village's worth of teachers, each passing on tiny fragments of knowledge borrowed from their own parents and grandparents. Relationships and partnerships within this world are more varied than a simple one man, one woman forever model. Different environments, different cultures, and different times probably saw different patterns. In some groups, long-term pair bond might have been the norm, partners raising children together for many seasons. In others, partnerships may have been more fluid, with people forming and dissolving unions as circumstances changed. There could have been arrangements we would today call polygynous, with one man linked to multiple women, or polyandrous, with one woman at the center of several male alliances, especially in tough environments where resource sharing was critical. The key point is that there was no single natural prehistoric marriage model. What remained constant was a need to manage jealousy, share resources, and protect children. Formal taboos, joking relationships, and unspoken rules all evolved to make this possible. Who can approach whom? Who owes whom meat or favors? Who can joke about what in public? These patterns act like quiet traffic lights, guiding everyone through the emotional maze of desire, loyalty, and responsibility. And a band of 30 is not the whole world. Beyond the circle of familiar faces around your fire, there are other bands, other groups speaking similar languages or dialects, tied to you by distant cousinship, old alliances, or simple habit. You might only see them a few times a year, but those visits are some of the most important events in your life. Imagine late summer or the end of the dry season, when resources are temporarily abundant in one particular valley. Herds gather, fish are running, fruit trees are heavy. Word spreads, not with phones or maps, but through chains of meetings. A lone hunter passes another band and mentions where the game is thick. A visiting cousin talks about a river bend full of fish. Slowly, bands converge. This is your version of a festival. At the seasonal gatherings, trade blossoms. A man from a coastal group brings shells and dried fish. Someone from the mountains brings obsidian for blades. Others of ochre for paint, fine skins, carved bone tools. Objects travel hundreds of miles in small jumps, changing hands again and again, each trade sealed with conversation, stories, maybe a shared meal. Mating happens here, too. If your band only has 30 people, you do not want everyone pairing up exclusively inside that tiny circle for generation after generation. Inbreeding is a silent killer, so alliances with other bands matter. Young people meet potential partners from outside. Some return to your band with a new mate. Some leave, joining another group permanently. In modern terms, this is population genetics. For your ancestors, it is just life moving forward. These gatherings are also where information spreads. Someone has discovered a new way of attaching stone points more securely to a spear with plant resin. Someone has found a valley where winter is a little less harsh. Someone has noticed a new predator in the area. Stories, warnings, and techniques ripple out through these networks like radio transmissions traveling across the continent, but carried in memories and words instead of wires. All of this depends on one extraordinary adaptation. Language, not just grunts and gestures, but layered, flexible, combinatorial speech. The ability to say not just lion and there, but 3 lions came from that ravine last dry season when the river was low, so do not camp there with small children. The ability to explain a hunting strategy, a myth, a dream. By 40,000 years ago, your ancestors almost certainly had languages as capable as any spoken today. Different vocabularies, different rhythms, but the same basic cognitive machinery, syntax, tense, metaphor, jokes, insults, love songs, lullabies. Language lets your band coordinate complex hunts. It lets elders tell children about dangers they have never personally seen. It lets news of a drought in the next valley overreach you before you run out of food. And at night, lying half asleep near the fire, language lets you drift on waves of quiet storytelling. Tales of heroic animals, clever ancestors, dangerous spirits, lost lovers. In this world, the elderly are not pushed aside. They are hard drives. In a physically demanding life, an old body cannot do everything it once could. Knees ache, eyes blur, hands shake a little when napping stone. But the mind, honed by decades of experience, becomes more valuable with each passing year. The old man who cannot chase a deer can still remember which stars mark the change of season. The grandmother who no longer gathers far from camp remembers which plants cure stomach pain and which are deadly. The elder who has lived through a brutal winter can advise when it is time to move, even if the sky and ground look deceptively calm. When a child's fever spikes, the elders recall past fevers and what helped. When smoke on the horizon hints at a distant fire, they remember the last time the forest burned, which animals fled which way, which valley stayed safe. They're walking libraries of famine and abundance, of floods and dry years, of conflicts and reconciliations. In a world without books, losing an elder suddenly is like a modern library catching fire overnight, which brings us to death. People died young, often from infection, injury, childbirth, accidents while hunting, or simply falling from a tree. But what is striking in the archaeological record is not just a fact of death. It is how people responded to it. We find graves, not just bodies dropped in holes, but careful arrangements, skeletons curled in fetal positions, sometimes dusted with red ochre as if painted for a final journey, individuals buried with tools, beads, pieces of meat, animal teeth, ornaments. In some Neanderthal sites, bodies appear to have been laid to rest in pits that were then filled deliberately, perhaps even with flowers. This suggests something more than disposal. It hints at ritual. Maybe your band believes the dead continue on in another place. Maybe they become animals. Maybe they watch over the living. Maybe there are stories about a shadow world underground or above the clouds. Whatever the specific belief, one thing seems clear. Death is not treated as nothing. When someone dies in your camp, the ordinary rhythm breaks. Gathering trips are postponed. Hunts are quieter. People sit closer together at night. Words are spoken more softly. Children ask questions. Adults tell stories about the dead person's bravery, generosity, or foolish mistakes. Death, too, becomes part of the gossip of the group, but in a different register. Not about behavior to be judged, but about meaning to be found. The act of burying the dead, of returning them to the earth with care, does something to the living. It knits them together in shared grief, shared memory, shared fear, and shared hope. In that sense, social life and community are not just pleasant add-ons to early human existence. They are the core technology that made everything else possible. Your ancestors did not survive because they were the strongest individuals. They survived because they were embedded in networks of care, obligation, communication, and memory. Around that small circle of 20 to 50 faces, faces you know better than your own reflection, the entire human story is already unfolding. Cooperation and conflict, love and jealousy, wisdom and foolishness, birth and loss, a tiny, moving tribe carrying fire, tools, stories, and genes across the landscape. As the sun drifts lower and the day begins to cool, those bonds of community will shape the last hours of your prehistoric day. How you gather around the fire, what you sing, what you remember, and what you dare to dream about for tomorrow. By the time the hunting and gathering of the day were done, when bellies were mostly full and the fire had burned down to a steady orange glow, something else usually began, something that did not fill the stomach or sharpen a spear, but still felt necessary. Your ancestors had another job besides staying alive. They had to make sense of being alive. Picture the entrance of a cave as night falls. The last light is fading outside. The air cools and the sound of insects and distant animal calls begin to rise. Inside, the fire paints the walls with moving shadows. Someone picks up a piece of red ochre. Someone else unrolls a length of sinew with shell beads threaded onto it. In the half-darkness, people start to transform themselves and the world around them. To us, it looks like art and religion. To them, it was probably just life. Let's start with the most famous evidence of that inner world. Deep in the dark, far from the cave mouth, far beyond where anyone needed to go to sleep or store food, there are paintings. Not casual doodles near the entrance, not quick sketches you might make while waiting out the rain. Some of the most spectacular images in Ice Age Europe appear hundreds of meters underground, in places you cannot even reach without crawling or climbing, places where no sunlight ever reaches. Horses, bison, lions, woolly rhinoceroses, mammoths, herds flowing across the stone as if the rock itself were alive. Carefully chosen curves in the cave wall become the bulging shoulder of a bison, the arch of an animal's ribs, the swell of a horse's chest. Some images are shaded and layered, as if the artist wanted them to move in the flickering torchlight. This was not interior decoration. No one was living down there. To make these paintings, people had to gather torches, fuel, pigments, and tools. They had to organize expeditions into absolute darkness. They had to know the cave well enough not to get lost. They chose these places deliberately, then filled them with images that, as far as we know, only they would ever see. Why? We do not know, but there are clues. One possibility is teaching. Imagine the hunters of your group bringing adolescents into the cave, torches in hand, pointing at painted herds while they tell stories, where to aim your spear, how a wounded animal behaves, which season the bison pass through which valley. The cave walls become a kind of three-dimensional blackboard, a school hidden under the earth. Another possibility is ritual. In many traditional societies, images of animals are not just pictures. They are tools to influence reality, to draw a successful hunt into being before it happens, to honor the spirit of the animals you depend on, to apologize even for taking their lives. Those painted bison may have been more like prayers and paintings, or maybe it was both, teaching wrapped in myth, practical knowledge encoded in sacred stories, a ritual hunt painted in the dark that prepared you for a real hunt in the dawn. And still the question lingers, why so deep? Why risk the dangers of underground tunnels when a rock face outside would work just as well? Some archaeologists think those deep chambers were chosen exactly because they cut you off from ordinary life. Once you were down there, there was no day or night, no horizon, no weather, just stone, darkness, fire, voices, and whatever moved inside your own mind. That is a perfect recipe for altered states of consciousness, which brings us to something we cannot fossilize, but we can infer: early spirituality. Across many hunter-gatherer cultures today, there are figures we would call shamans, people who dance, chant, fast, or use psychoactive plants to enter trance states. They travel to other realms, talk to ancestors, negotiate with animal spirits, heal the sick. If something like that existed tens of thousands of years ago, and the evidence suggests it might have, it would make perfect sense to bring those ceremonies deep underground, into the belly of the earth itself. In the dark caves of Europe, archaeologists have found strange clusters of dots, lines, and geometric signs around the animals. Not just realistic pictures, but abstract marks, ladders, zigzags, hand stencils, series of dots that may line up with lunar cycles. Some researchers think these marks formed an early notational system, a way of counting days, tracking seasons, maybe even predicting migrations. Others think those shapes resemble patterns people see in visions, the geometric flashes of light that appear behind closed eyes during trance. If that is true, then the walls of these caves are not just records of animals, but records of experiences inside the human mind. While all this was happening underground, something else was happening on the surface. People were decorating themselves. Long before the famous cave paintings of Europe, tens of thousands of years earlier, humans in Africa were grinding ochre, iron-rich minerals into powder. They mixed it with fat or water. They rubbed it on their skin. They smeared it on tools. They used it to stain hides. At sites over 100,000 years old, archaeologists have found pieces of ochre deliberately shaped and engraved, as well as shells pierced for threading. Little beads worn smooth in places where they rubbed against skin or clothing, stained with pigment, necklaces, bracelets, maybe anklets that jingled when you walked or danced. Personal adornment might sound trivial compared to hunting mammoths, but it marks a profound shift. When you start decorating your body, you're sending messages without words. Color, pattern, and jewelry tell people who you are and where you belong. Married or single, healer or hunter, member of this group, not that one. Those beads and pendants may have carried stories, too. A shell from the coast worn by someone who lived far inland means trade or travel or memory of a journey. A tooth from a dangerous animal might be a trophy, a reminder that you faced fear and survived. Red ochre in particular shows up over and over in burials. Bodies dusted with red, graves lined with pigment. Maybe it symbolized blood or life, or the setting sun. Maybe it was meant to protect the dead on a journey, or to make them visible to spirits. Whatever it meant something. By the time you get to about 35,000 years ago, the symbolic world becomes crowded. Now it is not just beads and paint and animal images. people start carving the human form itself. The Venus figurines, small, often handheld sculptures carved from bone, ivory, or stone. They share a similar style across huge distances, from France to Siberia. Many have exaggerated breasts, hips, and bellies. Faces are often minimal or absent. Arms and feet may be barely indicated. The focus is bodies that look pregnant, fertile, abundant. What were they? Some think they were fertility charms held by women as a kind of hope for healthy children. Others suggest they were representations of a mother goddess, an early form of deity that embodied birth, nourishment, and the cycles of life and death. There's even a theory that some were self-portraits carved by pregnant women looking down at their own bodies, seeing their belly, hips, and breasts, but not their face. We cannot be sure, but whatever their purpose, these figures show something crucial. People were thinking about themselves as symbols, not just that as a woman. But this small object stands for something bigger: womanhood, motherhood, life. And that symbolic thinking did not stop with bodies and animals. It extended to the sky. There are hints, just hints, that some early humans were paying careful attention to the stars. At a few sites, carved bones and stones show series of notches that may match the phases of the moon or seasonal events like migrations and plant ripenings. Certain animal images in caves appear clustered in ways that some researchers argue line up with star patterns seen at particular times of year. These interpretations are controversial, but it would not be surprising. If your survival depends on remembering when the herds move, when the salmon run, when certain plants are edible, you watch the sky, you notice patterns. Eventually, you might start to think the sky is a kind of giant story written just for you. And if the sky tells stories, then maybe the animals do, too. For hunter-gatherer peoples around the world, animals are rarely just meat. They are persons of a different sort. Teachers, tricksters, guardians. The bear that walks on two legs. The raven who steals the sun. The antelope that gave humans fire. These stories are not just entertainment. They are moral lessons, ecological knowledge, maps of the landscape woven into memory. Your Paleolithic ancestors almost certainly saw the world this way. When they painted a running horse on a cave wall, they may not have been drawing a horse. They may have been invoking a spirit that moves like a horse, thinks like a horse, sees a world from a horse's height. To offend that spirit might mean bad hunting for years. To honor it might bring abundance. The result is a world where everything is alive with meaning. Rocks, rivers, trees, animals, clouds, stars, all beings, all with stories and intentions. And in that world, special people would emerge. The ones who dream vividly, who notice patterns no one else sees, who can calm a panicked child or soothe someone in pain with words and songs. These might become the shamans, or whatever your ancestors called them. Imagine a night near the fire. The day's work is done. People sit in a loose circle, some mending nets, others half asleep. The shaman or the storyteller, the singer, the one who goes between, begins. A drum starts. Maybe nothing more than stretched hide over a frame or a hollow log struck with a stick. The beat begins slow, heart-like, then faster. Voices rise. Feet start to tap. The group's breathing unconsciously synchronizes. After a while, you are not just listening to the rhythm, you are inside it. Music is one of the oldest human technologies we know. Bone flutes made from the wing bones of birds. Hollowed-out reindeer antlers that can be played like wind instruments. Simple percussion instruments that would leave no trace in the archaeological record, but are almost certainly as old as language itself. In the flickering firelight, rhythm and melody do something extraordinary. They dissolve the boundaries between individuals. When everyone moves in time, sings the same phrase, claps on the same beat, the group becomes a single organism for a while. Fear contracts. Time stretches. People enter shared trance states, mild or deep, without needing drugs, just breath and sound and movement. In those moments, the stories about animal spirits and ancestors and journeys to other realms are not just tales. They feel real, because you are experiencing something that is in fact real. A different mode of consciousness, a different way of being a mind and a body surrounded by other minds and bodies doing the same thing. That is the social function of early spirituality. It is not only about explaining thunderstorms or what happens after you die. It is about welding small, fragile groups of humans into something strong enough to survive. Shared rituals, shared symbols, shared songs. They are the glue that holds a band together when food is scarce and danger is near. And when you put all of this together, the deep cave art, the beads and ochre, the carved figurines, the abstract marks, the music and trance, you get a picture of early humans that is very different from the caricature of brutish cavemen. By day, they tracked animals, napped stone, dug roots, watched the weather. By night, they stepped into a different world. A world where the dead might listen, where the sky might speak, where animals had secret names and mountains remembered. They carried heavy spears and sharp tools. But they also carried invisible things, myths, songs, rules, taboos, dreams. And when the fire finally burned low and the last stories ended, when the ochre-stained hands were wiped clean on hides, when the drums went silent and people stretched out on beds of grass and skins, they fell asleep in a universe they had helped to create. A universe of meaning layered over the raw facts of cold, hunger, and danger. While they slept, the painted herds waited in the dark tunnels underground. The beads rested against sleeping skin. The Venus figurine lay beside someone's head, or buried in a pouch with other small treasures. Above them, the stars turned slowly, whether anyone watched or not. By morning, the practical work of survival would begin again, but that inner life, the songs, the symbols, the sense of hidden forces moving through everything never really stopped. It is still with us. Only now, instead of torchlight on limestone, we use screens in the dark. Instead of ochre on skin, we use digital avatars and fashion brands. Instead of carved ivory figurines, we have icons and logos and characters that mean far more to us than their physical substance. The tools have changed. The wiring underneath has not. As the night deepens in our Paleolithic camp, the last embers glow red. Someone turns over in their sleep. A child murmurs and is soothed. Outside, a distant wolf howls, and no one wakes. They have heard it 1,000 times. Tomorrow will bring more walking, more gathering, maybe another hunt. But for now, in the quiet between the crackling coals and the first light of dawn, the inner life of early humans rests, not vanished, just waiting to rise again with the sun and the stories. And as that new day begins, we can follow them into the next part of their routine. By late afternoon, the light is changing. Shadows start to stretch. Colors drain out of the landscape, and the temperature drops faster than you would expect. For Paleolithic people, this is not just a pretty sunset. It is a signal, a quiet alarm clock telling everyone, whatever you still need to do, finish it now. The open landscape that felt manageable in daylight becomes something very different in the dark. Depth perception collapses. Predators that spent the day hiding in the shade start to move. So your ancestors begin to contract their world, pulling it inward, drawing activity toward the same thing that has defined evening for humans for at least hundreds of thousands of years. Fire. Not everybody had it all the time. There were probably still groups that lost fire occasionally or went without during travel. But for many late Paleolithic communities, fire was as central to the evening as gravity is to your body right now. It is not just a tool. It is a boundary line. Inside the circle of light and warmth, us. Outside it, everything else.